All right. Hi, everybody. Today, very excited to have Angela Washko here today visiting. Angela is going to be here for a whole week, apparently. So I'll tell you about that in a minute. Angela Washko is an artist, writer, and facilitator devoted to creating new forums for discussions of feminism in spaces frequently hostile towards it. Since 2012, Washko has operated the Council on Gender Sensitivity and Behavioral Awareness in World of Warcraft, an ongoing intervention inside the most popular online role-playing game of all time. Washko's most recent project, The Game, is a video game presenting the practices of several prominent seduction coaches, aka pickup artists, through the format of a dating simulator. Angela is an assistant professor of art at Carnegie Mellon University and a fellow at the Studio for Creative Inquiry. A recent recipient of a Franklin Furnace Performance Fund grant, I'll skip some of these, there's a lot of them. A Rhizome Internet Art Microgrant. Washko's practice has been highlighted in Art in America, Frieze Magazine, Time Magazine, The Guardian, Art Forum, the New York Times, and other places. Her projects have been presented nationally and internationally at venues including Kiasma Museum of Contemporary Art, where Urqui's from, LA County Museum of Contemporary Art, LACMA, the Milan Design Triennial, the Shenzhen Independent Animation Biennial, the Hammer Museum, and the Rotterdam International Film Festival. This is a good time to announce on Tuesday, a week from exactly now, we're going to have our yearly Game Art Festival at the Hammer Museum, and Angela's one of our featured artists. There's going to be about 50 artists and projects in the festival. It's a 3.5-hour kind of party with food and magic and drinks and games and performances on stage, and it's a good time to actually play Angela's game in depth, and she'll have another project there as well. So help me welcome Angela today, please.
Ooh, yay, cool lighting, mood lighting. Thanks to you all for coming. Thanks to the Game Lab and to Ito for organizing my visit. I'm just gonna jump in. I'm a research-based artist making performances, videos, written works, and interventions, often within video game and internet enclave contexts. And I've also more recently been developing my own video games. Today I'll talk about a few projects that have informed my most recent project, The Game, which, as mentioned, is a video game about pickup artists. I was gonna plug the Game Art Festival, but you already did it, so, but yeah, if you are interested in going into it a little bit deeper, we'll see if you will be after our playthrough together, because we will play through a little bit of it today. I'm just gonna put it out there. There will be some difficult / adult content in this presentation toward the end. It goes tonally from kind of light to pretty dark, and I'll try to give adequate warnings when we get to that content. I wanted to start things off with this. In the field of art, we have at this point established lots of terms and protocols to describe artists and artworks in which social exchanges in physical spaces become the core elements of the artwork. The Tate Modern describes socially engaged art as any art form which involves people and communities in debate, collaboration, or social interaction. This is a generous way of describing a set of practices that has also been called participatory art, community-based art, social practice, Suzanne Lacey's term, new genre public art, and contextual practice, which is the term we use at CMU, but not really anywhere else, among many other terms. But I'm wondering, why then, since so many of us spend a significant amount of our social exchanges mediated by technological interfaces and within virtual spaces, do we not have a strong discourse or set of terms to describe artists engaged in work that involves people and communities in debate, collaboration, or social interaction, specifically within multi-user online environments? I'm unfortunately not going to coin a term right now, but I want to say that this field, which does have more than a few artists somewhat disparately engaged in it, and if you come to my workshop on Thursday, if you're in on that, we'll talk about some of those artists. This field does not get examined within the lens of socially engaged art and could use proper examining in terms of politics, codes of conduct, and what these practices tell us about the sociocultural specificity of online spaces. To speak for my own practice, I explore the social structures of multi-user online environments and use them as sites for performance and intervention. I think I'm asking, what do presence, participation, embodiment, and consent mean in digital spaces when our bodies are not perceived as at risk, but our exchanges are no less real? I'm arguing that this is real life, even though it's masked by avatars, dragons, and really sweet fantasy environments. Hopefully this is evident through just how heavy the first public conversation as intervention I hosted inside World of Warcraft was. The video currently playing was the result of an 8-hour-long conversation with a 19-year-old pregnant woman in the Bible Belt who called her primary character Chastity, and talked with me at length about her pro-life perspective, as well as her many years on the receiving end of domestic sexual assault. It's still one of the most intense conversations I've had in my entire life, and it took place inside of World of Warcraft. I've played World of Warcraft since it came out in late 2005, early 2006. From 2012 to 2016, I created performative interventions inside World of Warcraft. Instead of killing enemies and getting badass equipment like I had for 6 years prior to its founding, as the Council on Gender Sensitivity and Behavioral Awareness in World of Warcraft, I started traveling to highly populated virtual towns in the game to discuss the ways in which women were treated in the game space with other players. If you don't know this, WoW has had a player base that's pretty notorious for being quite hostile toward women, people of color, as well as queer and gender nonconforming people. So I sought to figure out why exchanges in this otherwise fantasy-looking landscape reflected and reinforced the stereotypical politics of everyday life, instead of perhaps liberating us from them, as early cyberfeminists may have hoped for. In early cyberfeminist visions of the internet, there was a hopeful imagination that digital environments would allow us to perform in ways that move beyond our daily lives, where we're restricted by race, gender, and sexuality, and instead allow for complex states of being and performing previously unexplored. But as the earliest sexual assault in digital space was recorded inside a massively multiplayer text-based game in Julian Diebel's 1992 text, A Rape in Cyberspace, we've learned that we're just as bound to the restrictive categorization that we inhabit in physical space when we enter virtual spaces. If you haven't read Lisa Nakamura's book, Race in Cyberspace, she covers the reinforcement of discrimination in the early web in great detail, and I would recommend it. So for 4 years, I facilitated public conversations in this game space, which were often very lengthy, and covered topics including why so many men choose to play female avatars, which I'll go into in a minute, why many male players think that women are biologically predisposed to be worse at video games than men, how women facing harassment in the space deal with that experience, why go back into the kitchen and make me a sandwich became such a common phrase among the player base, why so many of the diverse players who once played WoW when it started eventually were leaving, and why feminism was the most polarizing word I could say in the space, among many other more unexpected topics. World of Warcraft, like many other online spaces, is a place where people find a different way of performing as themselves, a different way of expressing intimacy, and often a different way of expressing the politics that mirror the offline world. As we move more and more into online spaces where we have to be identified as ourselves to participate through real name policies, so we can be tracked and identified by various interested parties, from advertisers to our own government, spaces like MMORPGs, which retain the anonymity of their participants, where we're identified by avatars with silly names like Ooh Kitties, as I am here. These spaces create opportunities for an intimacy more akin to the internet of the 1990s. WoW as a space has facilitated bonds so powerful, I've interviewed many players in World of Warcraft who have found their spouses playing the game in completely geographically separated places. Unfortunately, Despite the beauty of that intimacy, more often than not, if you're known to be a woman, WoW is a space where you may be asked repeatedly to get back into the kitchen and make male players a sandwich, or whispered repeatedly for sexual favors, or told straight up, tits or get the fuck out, if you're deemed only useful to the space as a source of sexual fantasy. I initially went into the project with a plan to try to change the sexist, homophobic, and racist language casually used inside WoW by rallying other players who were frustrated with the discrimination in the space. However, as I talked to more and more players about it, the reasoning for its existence became increasingly complex, and I realized that trying to change it was not only unrealistic, but also somewhat colonial in its impulse. So my intentions shifted away from changing to rather trying to create a constant presence and public visibility for the issues of exclusivity that marginalized players face in the space by meeting and talking about it regularly. In a sense, just trying to take up space to let players know that World of Warcraft didn't belong to any one particular gamer identity. One of the many subtopics of the project involved an investigation into why in more recent years in WoW, men have overwhelmingly started to play female avatars. Here are players telling me that he projects a human female onto his avatar. Through these conversations, which I always disclose to participants will be presented elsewhere, I began to realize that most of the female avatars I was talking to in the game space were actually played by men. This hunch was backed by Nikki's 2010 census data, which stated that 55% of the female avatars running around in WoW were played by men. And on the other hand, less than 1% of women play male avatars. Initially, I thought this whole men playing women phenomenon was kind of exciting, and I imagined that men were playing women because they wanted to have the perspective of embodying a woman or having the empathetic experience of learning what it's like to play WoW perceived as a woman and frequently whispered for sexual favors. But I was wrong. Avatar bodies are treated as abstracted objects of desire. Even in a casual collaborative battle setting where I'm not even remotely discussing feminism, if it's known that I'm a woman in the space, I'm automatically something to project male sexual fantasy and ownership onto. Women often accept this as their scarcity is also a benefit in terms of trading their femaleness for preferential treatment in guilds, getting gifts of gold and equipment, and so on. In this image, which is a little hard to see in this room, but we're about to fight a boss. I'm literally just trying to beat a dungeon with a bunch of other random players that I don't know. Again, not discussing feminism. Here, I managed to type E, like several E's, like E, which is something I say all the time if you know me. But even just typing this, suddenly the player Destromath's relationship to me changed dramatically. He went from discussing battle strategy to abruptly sexualizing me. You can see him here emoting in the text. Destromath stares at Ooh Kitty's titties and likes what he's seeing. And this only got worse from there, but I won't go into it. With so many men playing female avatars, women have to actually come out as women to be identified as such. And many players just don't do that. Here a player describes hoping that players assume that she's a man to avoid getting shit-talked or criticized for her skill because she's a woman. So yeah, this question became a frequent focus in my discussions as the council. I just started asking men point blank why they play as women. Here are players telling me that their avatar, a female Pandaren, just turns them on. This is not an uncommon answer, especially as you as a player are positioned sort of behind your character, sort of watching your character, as opposed to a first-person game where you are the character, you embody the character. So as you watch your character, players were relating to this idea of kind of having ownership over their avatar rather than being their avatar, which I think was an interesting distinction. I was more surprised ultimately to find that when asking men why they play as women, this answer was the most frequent, because I'd rather look at a girl's butt than a guy's butt. An answer that I got repeatedly and probably have 100 screenshots of. And I started to wonder, how does this line of thinking become so pervasive? It's as if somebody decided all of a sudden and it became an informal rule across all of the many servers of World of Warcraft. So I became interested in the social codes produced and enforced that would create this kind of universal canned response. Here we are around a campfire trying to figure out, when did this all start happening? When did, the whole butt thing come into play? These codes became so ubiquitous across servers that many male players have said to me that they play women as a way to avoid a fear of being perceived as gay by other players. Here, the red text means that this player is actually shouting to the whole town that he plays women to make it clear that he's not gay. So here you can clearly see that the politics of offline life are very present in World of Warcraft. Through the 4 years of the project, the council had a generally appreciated and active presence on the primary server I played on, and an intentional inclusive guild was created as a result of regularly hosting these conversations, as the community came up with long-term ways for the project to live on without my facilitation. The project also became a prototype for other interventions and actions in multi-user game spaces, and ideally, I hope that it will maybe generate discussion and change around how designers and developers can be held accountable for what happens in their spaces, even if they don't intend these sorts of things to happen, and work toward creating more inclusive environments. Yeah, we also have performed it live. In the most recent iteration of the live performance, I recruited 2 other players to work with me in the game for a year, and then we came together in physical space and produced a live performance of the process. That was neat. If you're interested in learning more about the project, there's a pretty comprehensive essay I wrote for Creative Time called Why Talk Feminism in World of Warcraft. Yeah, moving on. When I was operating as the Council on Gender Sensitivity and Behavioral Awareness in World of Warcraft, I was spending a whole lot of time in WoW. I even started another project in which I wandered the landscape in a way that was not encouraged by the developers of the game, as the game's leveling trajectory began requiring less and less actual representative travel, and more queuing in lines to wait to be transported to places and dungeons. After doing this wandering for a while, I started convincing other players to join me and began calling the practice the World of Warcraft Psychogeographical Association. I was really into official titles at the time. I've kind of moved away from that. Operating under this title, I perform these long drifts through underappreciated aspects of the landscape, inviting players to take time off from the game's quest structure and explore with me. I even did a 12-hour-long version at Kiasma, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Helsinki, in 2014, and I was surprised that anybody would go see someone just wander around World of Warcraft in a theater, but a few people did. On these drifts, I often explore areas of the landscape that are now completely inhabited by artificial intelligence. As the game has expanded, there are many aspects of the landscape that are no longer useful within the leveling trajectory. I find these abandoned and operational spaces to be pretty interesting. I also misplay a lot of games as a part of my practice, which you won't see as much of today. Yeah, we looked for yellow flowers. That was nice. So I like to mention this project because as often as I was doing the sort of heavier sort of ethnography-oriented behavioral research study-ish experiments as the council, I was also at the same time doing as many silly and absurd gestures and performances in the space. And I'm going to show a quick clip from an experiment by the WoW Psychogeographical Association in which I started a scantily clad orc and troll march with other players. And then we'll move away from World of Warcraft.
Tazdingle! Tazdingle!
Victory or death? Back, 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 back. Back, 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 back. Victory or death?
Tazdingle!
Okay, so you get the idea. I'm not even going to go into the culturally insensitive design of some of these characters, because that's a whole other talk. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to go backwards in time a little bit. In many of my works, I take the position of a critical user inhabiting video games and online spaces and looking for patterns within them which communicate something that isn't overtly stated. In 2010, I started replaying the role-playing video games I played growing up and finding recurring patterns in the representation of women in these spaces, which was prior to Nita Sarkeesian's Tropes versus Women. And I just mentioned that because that is such a familiar project and has such a large impact, and this was a little bit before that. But this image is from a 10-channel video work, which randomizes moments I captured from replaying 20 different role-playing games I grew up with and looking at their recurring depictions of women as always in trouble, in need of rescue, running scared, dying romantically for the benefit of the male player's emotional engagement, being physically and emotionally weak, and desperate. These are just a few stills from the different moments and categories from these videos, all from totally different games. Don't leave me is a phrase cried out repeatedly by women in these games. There's another don't leave me from Chrono Trigger. Another theme I found is very romanticized scenes of women dying while men watch. There's another one that's from Valkyrie Profile. Metal Gear Solid 2, Final Fantasy 4. Pretty cute. So in addition to looking at video games from my childhood, I started looking at television and films as well, and started thinking of my focus on the repetition of these images or representations as data or evidence, and started thinking of ways of employing humor as a way to invite viewers and to address these gross and seemingly obvious plot injustices. This was also an early start for me at thinking about where art could belong and how to have conversations about critical issues within supposedly low forms of pop culture, which at the time I didn't think were getting enough critical analysis. And I was thinking, if we aren't invested in the media that so much of our culture consumes, how will the ideologies communicated within them ever change? And also, I just liked reality TV, I guess. I'm going to show 4 minutes of my video, Millionaire Worthy, a Primer Home Edition, which later led to the creation of a short public access TV series called Millionaire Worthy TV. I also want to mention that Donald Trump's presence in this video has made the video a little bit different for me now. In 2013, when the video was made, I didn't anticipate that he could possibly be our next president. So he just kind of shows up in there, and like at the time it was just like he was a random billionaire on this list, and now he's like our president or something. Okay.
Hello, ladies. Do you want to be successful? Of course you do. Well, I'm going to try to change your mind. This is the richest man in the world according to Forbes' top billionaire list of 2013. There are only 48 women in the top 400 richest people in the United States list.
Now I gotta see you walk.
So, the odds of us ladies making $1 million on our own, quite unlikely. So I'm here today to teach you the valuable lessons that I learned recently. I learned the keys to attracting a rich, successful man. After watching 72 episodes or 6 whole seasons of Bravo Television's Millionaire Matchmaker, I've created a formula to make sure that you get the true happiness and success that you deserve. This is Patty Stanger, the CEO of the Millionaires Club. She's responsible for providing these men with women who fit their extremely specific criteria. Now remember, ladies, when you're that wealthy, you're allowed to be extremely particular about everything, and that includes women. Here's just a small sampling of what some of these highly deserving millionaires are looking for.
I have very high standards.
I don't date a particular age if she's 23 or whatever. It doesn't matter. At 58, it's hard to date people that are typically older, but do I look 58? I like more petite women.
I would say that I like petite girls.
I'm looking for someone I can have a kid with.
I want a woman that I can almost nearly worship.
Basically, I'm looking for a female version of me.
I like Marilyn Monroe, Adriana Lima, Nicole from the Pussycat Dolls, but with the personality of somebody like Conan O'Brien.
I say for my ideal, it's 25 to 28.
I like short girls.
No divorces, no diseases, no kids.
I want hot blonde.
Nurturing, take care of their man.
Between 5'2" and 5'8".
Very open and energetic, not too energetic, where she's da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Someone with a good family. I love femininity.
Petite, slender, size 0 to 3 or 4.
Brunette, long dark hair, green blue eyes, a nice smile.
I'm attracted to the exotic sort of ethnic type.
I like exotic. My perfect woman basically is someone exotic looking, brunette, spontaneous, that's going to definitely keep the penis up. I want a woman who enjoys cooking.
Women are here to be great wives.
I'd really like to replace my time masseuse with a wife.
I believe in the traditional roles where a man is a man and a woman is a woman, and while I'm watching football, the woman should be in the kitchen cooking something for me.
I want a nice girl who I like. 34C, 2333.
So now that you've seen a sampling of what some of these highly successful men are looking for, are you worthy of a millionaire? Well, I've done your homework for you. By taking the descriptions of what male millionaires are looking for on the show and turning it into analytical data, I'm able to give you a concrete breakdown of exactly what you need to be in order to snag one. I've got to ask you, do you have what it takes to be worthy of a millionaire? These men are looking for a woman who is or has the following 100 qualities. These are in order from least requested being 100 and most requested being number 1. Of course, there are more than 300 things that men have asked for over the course of 6 seasons of Millionaire Matchmaker. These are just the most occurring. We're looking for a woman who is or has number 100, classy. Number 99, ready to commit. Deep, under size 3, voluptuous, respectful toward me, tiny, young.
I really do go through all of it, and I'm sure it would be really helpful for you, but I'm gonna go to maybe like number 15-ish range, so you get the most pertinent items. Oh, but this is a good one. Oh, I couldn't have hoped for a better option to land on randomly without being able to see the timestamp. I'm really glad you got to see that. You skipped all the way to 58. Shit, okay. Ooh. Getting close. Ooh, classic. Okay. Okay, cool. We're about where I want to be. All right.
Make a good mother. Smart. Funny. Strong family values. Number 10. Here we get into the top 10, folks. Number 10. Big tits. Great butt. Number 8. Fun. Number 7. Intelligent. Number 6. Short. Number 5. Hot. Number 4. Capable and interested in having children. Number 3. Petite. Number 2. Beautiful. And coming in at number 1, we have brunette. So I'm sure you're probably all thinking, I possess all 100 of those qualities. Why don't I have a millionaire already? What am I doing wrong?
Okay, the answer that I provide is no longer accurate, so let's just move on. So in the midst of the work I was doing in WoW and games in general, and at a time when I was becoming increasingly interested in the politics of romance, I started another project which was focused on anti-feminist male seduction communities online. So starting in 2014, I became interested in a figure named Rushvi. Do any of you know who that is? Okay, a couple. That's okay. You're gonna know a lot of him now, so sorry. So his writing and his ideologies seemed to overlap with a lot of the men I was talking to inside World of Warcraft who self-identified as men's rights activists or members of the manosphere. So after seeing some writing circulate on the internet about his book Don't Bang Denmark, a country where I'd just been visiting, I decided to investigate further and began to read his books, his blog, and his incredibly active Rushvi community forum. In case you're not familiar, as many of you aren't, Rushvi has been called the most infamous misogynist on the internet, and we all know he has a lot of competition there. He spends his time traveling around the world teaching men how to perform in particular ways in order to have sex with as many women as possible across geographic, language, and cultural barriers as quickly as possible. He writes a series of travel guides called Bang, Day Bang, Bang Iceland, Bang Poland, Bang Ukraine, Don't Bang Denmark, Bang Colombia, and so on. I didn't make this image. This is by one of his many community members. He's also the founder of Return of Kings, a very active online, what we would now call alt-right blog, with many writers devoted to discussing neo-masculinity, an ideological term coined by Rushvi to identify men who want to return to radically traditional family values and would like to see women in the United States have their right to vote revoked, among many other incredibly conservative things. My project Banged emerged out of reading his website, books, blogs, and forum. After reading so much of his writing for his online devoted community of followers, one thing really stuck out to me. In Rush's many accounts of his sexual exploits, the perspectives of the women he's explicitly talking about in his books and web posts are never represented. So I decided that I wanted to create a web and book project through which I'd hope to give the supposedly thousands of women that Rushvi has slept with, using the extreme and aggressive strategies outlined in his book, an opportunity to anonymously report and critique their experiences. After pursuing mainstream media distribution of my call for these women, it occurred to me that Rush knew about my project, as he wrote about it on Twitter. And his awareness of the project changed it for me. He became less of an abstract villain that I was free to run a sort of smear campaign on, and more of a person and more of a subject. I decided that I should stop mimicking the shock media tactics that his own community would use for different means, and move toward investigating further into actually trying to understand his motivations, as well as the appeal that he and his practice held for his growing community of followers, many of whom make up what we now know as the alt-right. Can everybody still hear me? I know I'm a little quiet. I can talk like this, if it's better. Okay, no response. Moving on. I pursued getting Rushvi to do an interview with me via Skype. This took months of email negotiating and literally sending him one question per day over email at his request, while he tested my commitment to the project and my overall submissiveness. The video interview ended up being accidentally 2 hours long and was very exhausting. I'm going to play 2 short clips from that interview to give you a sense of what it was like. And I just want you to know before we watch it, there's definitely some sexually explicit talk in this clip, as well as a mystifying conversation about female orgasms. So let's do it.
I'm a heterosexual, normal man without any alternative lifestyle leanings. I'm just an average guy. And I feel
you write these books.
Yeah.
So can you just, for an audience that may not be familiar with the books that you've written, can you just describe a little bit about Bang, Day Bang, Bang, Iceland, Don't Bang Denmark, and so on? I love Denmark, by the way.
Each book is just basically trying to help men learn how to meet women and initiate sexual relationships, how to start a conversation with the woman, how to build attraction with a woman, how to get her into bed.
If you don't mind, I do want to read a section from Bang that maybe you could sort of respond to, because I think, based on what you're saying, some of the things that in Bang are maybe a more extreme version of what you're practicing now.
You may be trying to play this out of context type of game where you quote
something. Oh no, I'm sorry. I don't want to tell me to stop if you want.
Let's see, because I know that's what people have done when you just pull a quote.
I just want, I'll let you respond to it, because I don't want you to, get upset or anything.
No, hey, that's what I wrote. It's theirs.
This is just called, if you don't feel like a creep, you're not pushing hard enough.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a great start. And I get, I'm not trying to.
Ooh, what did I do? Oh no, sorry.
To exploit you, I'm just. She's not going to invite you upstairs like in the movies. She's not going to tell you she wants to have sex with you. She's not going to grab your dick and put it in. You must always be making the first move and always be pushing. If you're scared, she'll think of you as a creep. That means you're on the right path. Remember that girls who like you are flattered that you want to have sex with them. So moving quickly is an indirect way of showing interest that can be helpful for new relationships. Get her to your place or hers the same night you meet her. Get her into the bedroom. Take off her clothes and keep going. If she resists, take a break and start over again. Break her down and bang her, and then take her out and bang her again. And then on page 90 something, pound away like a jackhammer until she gets tired and gives in. This isn't an elegant approach, but it works. Any human resistance can be broken down with enough pressure. I just feel like that's a little bit more extreme than what you were explaining earlier.
How did I not win the Nobel Prize?
Let's imagine that I do, somehow, find 20 women that have slept with you. What do you think these women might say about the seduction process and your sexual performance?
I would say that they would probably say that I approached them with good energy. I didn't scare them. I made them feel comfortable. I didn't come on really strong. But at the same time, I didn't come in with such a low energy that they weren't interested. I'm really good at keeping a conversation going, even if the girl is not giving me a lot back. I make everything feel natural, from how I touch and kiss, and I mean, it's rarely the point where a girl will have to stop me and say, no, I don't like it when you touch me there. Because I can read them. I know, but based on how they act, how they talk, how they move, when they want me to do the next step. And after sex, I get lazy because now I already got most of what I wanted. So I just want to go to have the lowest possible expectations. So I don't have a day where I don't want to try. So it's actually a blessing and a curse to be good in bed. But I'm not, so.
You mentioned your orgasm is of primary importance and that you don't go down on women. That's true. Can I ask why?
Because nature has deemed the male orgasm to be more important. If right now a magic cloud of gas surrounds the earth and infected girls and prevented them from ever having a female orgasm again, the human species would go on still. But if this cloud of gas only affected men and prevented the male orgasm, what would happen? The human species is done. It is freaking done. Therefore, nature, not me, nature has declared that the male orgasm is essential to life, But the female orgasm is like a cherry on top. You know, if she gets it, hey, that's great, yummy. But if not, it doesn't matter. So I believe in what nature has said about it.
All the things that have been said in defense of nature. So this project ended up taking on a lot of forms even after the interview. Roosh was initially very enthusiastic about my search for his partners and the project in general, probably also the attention that it generated. And his community initially appreciated the 2-hour-long interview because I acknowledged that I was a self-identified feminist, inclined to disagree with him, but was willing to maintain civility with regards to my interview questions and my overall demeanor. And I also didn't edit the interview at all. I put it up as is. However, as mainstream media continued to be interested in my search for his partners, his community became more and more frustrated that the media had an overall negative view of Roosh, despite the unedited 2-hour-long interview with him. His community debated my project and harassed me over email, social media, comment sections of mainstream news sites, and a massive and still ongoing comment thread on the Roosh v. forum, and additionally wrote threatening statements to employers, friends, peers, and colleagues in an attempt to discredit what I was doing. They let me know that they knew where I lived and where I worked, and continued to sexually harass me, sending me rape and death threats, and accusing me of stalking Roosh. As the project continued to get more attention, Roosh himself also suggested that if I continued my search, he would sue me for libel. I'm not talking about this to play up a sort of victim narrative, as I certainly recognize myself as an active agent who started the whole thing. But I want to make it clear that this online context, unlike World of Warcraft, where I'm not protected by an avatar, when I interacted with this online community, it certainly comes with higher risk. As a performer who'd seen real impact on the space in World of Warcraft as a result of my actions as the council, I naively applied some of the same logic and strategies to this project without realizing the primary difference in my position in these two spaces. In WoW, I'm very recognizable as a long-term high-level member of the community with high-level gear only obtained through years of commitment to the game, clearly a participant and not an outsider. In Roosh V's manosphere, just my very being makes me the enemy, a symbol of everything wrong in today's world to them, and someone who clearly operates against their values. Regardless of any attempts to perform civility, and even at times acting with something that did sincerely start to feel like empathy, there's no way this project would have ended smoothly for me. And I really couldn't maintain my performance of submissiveness. It's not my style. And for a year, it felt like I would never be able to live it down. This is a video from one of the emails that I was getting nearly daily from members of his community over the year of the project. And WNB, if you're not familiar, means would not bang. Wah, wah, wah. As a result of realizing how visible and vulnerable I was online, and after being constantly harassed and notified about this harassment on all of my devices, I removed myself from a lot of the online spaces I had at one time found liberating, democratizing, and exciting at other times of my life. My Twitter account is now private, and I'm much more aware of the language used to publish information about my everyday whereabouts and what I'm doing. If I ever had any doubt that the digital was an extension of the real, all of this certainly vanished because of this project. The project took on a lot of forms. I made books about it. There were art exhibitions. I turned it into a storytelling performance for intimate audiences. And ultimately, I was unable to publish the accounts of the women I interviewed for fear of their safety. If you're interested in seeing some of the behind-the-scenes process, or even more of the behind-the-scenes, like the actual emails that I sent to Roosh and whatnot, I have an essay in Field Journal of Socially Engaged Art Criticism, which lists a lot of that. Okay, on to the last thing. Toward the end of the Bang project, something I felt was getting in the way of the work was actually my performance role. The project became a lot about my experience operating in this field, like my personal experience. I decided that I would put myself out of the spotlight and make the project less about my mediation of and intervention in these spaces, and more about creating an embodied way for people to digest experiences from and ideologies within these manosphere seduction communities. There's so much information, behavioral psychology, and coded language in this field, and a lot of it is very painful to process, especially if you're a woman and have dealt with sexual harassment and sexual assault. And so with all of the experience I now have mapping this field, as a researcher, I'm able to put myself in the position to filter it all into a game scenario so that one might actually walk away being able to make sense of it without having to spend, the time that I have in this field and hopefully develop tactics to respond to it. So we'll play through this together in a moment. But after the Banged project, followers of other seduction gurus reached out to me to tell me that Ruch's variety of pickup was much more extreme and much more misogynistic than other types of pickup art that are more focused on teaching men self-confidence and self-improvement to help level the dating playing field. I thought that this seemed like a valid point, and I think that such a service should exist, so I decided to take a deeper look into the variety of pickup artist gurus, or seduction coaches as they've reframed themselves, and the differences between the types of pickup art they're teaching, and then ultimately make a game about them. The title is a play on the best-selling book by Neil Strauss, The Game, which was the first mainstream primer into this world, which sort of originated as a couple of guys with a Web 1.0 online community forum called Mysteries Lounge, and turned into a lucrative seduction coaching lifestyle for some. Ultimately, the game will be released online, but for now it's been mostly shown in art gallery and festival contexts. The band Shoo Shoo composed the soundtrack to The Game, so it has a pretty dark, and I would say considered an intense musical score, which you'll get to hear in a moment when we play through it. In developing The Game, I present the different seduction techniques of famous pickup artists and allow those pickup artists to speak for themselves through their work and force players to interact with them in the most common location for pickup art, a bar. Players, regardless of personal gender identity, are put into the position of experiencing a common scenario that femme-presenting people experience, having their personal space invaded when it's unwelcome by men who feel entitled to it. Chapter 1 focuses on research material from infamous pickup artist Julian Blanc's first major multi-DVD training program, PIMP. This is what the program costs now at a reduced price, if after this talk you're interested. All of the dialogue in the game is constructed from actual word-for-word advice written by these pickup artists in their books, websites, and from their DVD programs, and also situations from their own hidden camera footage that they sell to their devoted followers. A lot of these coaching materials are prohibitively expensive and not available in full online. I hypothesize not just for profit, but also to keep people who aren't looking to learn from them from finding out about them, because they do tend to be kind of extreme. But I got a grant, so I bought a bunch of them, like all of them. I'm gonna show an excerpt from one of Julian Blanc's videos, which does include an Infield hidden camera video. This is a really heavy video. I'm just gonna say that now. It's not sexually explicit in any way, but there's definitely non-consensual behavior. It's not graphic, but I would say that it's really disturbing. So if you're maybe feeling like you might be uncomfortable with that, I will not in any way be bothered if you step out. So I'm just gonna give a second to make that sit in. Okay, so this is from Pimp.
So when I'm like, you know what, it's after party, let's go, I'm gonna throw in the word now. Okay, like, you know what, after party, now. Boom, and I will order and command now. Now, okay? Listen, you don't have to if you don't want to, but let's go now. Okay, we get along, right? After party, now. Adventure, now. Let's go, now. This second, now. This second, now. Okay, I'm gonna hammer that shit in. I'll also do like, you know what, after party, because otherwise I have to go. AKA, it has to happen now. Okay, so keep that in mind. Take the responsibility off of the girl and create a sense of urgency.
Kiss me goodbye or real kiss?
No, we're
very
done.
nice guys. I'll never see you again.
We're just assholes.
Don't give a shit.
But Julian is a freshman.
Hey, we have so much in common.
Apologies.
What do we have in common? What do you mean?
The connection. We're just like,
Ridiculous.
we're too similar.
Erica,
She won't see.
no.
I'll hide it. I have massive shoulders. She won't see.
Get out of town.
That's what she said. Okay, real fast, real fast.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
A real kiss, not shake.
You're crazy.
She's gone. Okay, we already kissed. It's too late. Give her a real kiss.
You're crazy.
Redemption. It's like a video game. Redemption. Are you gonna cheat on a shitty kiss?
No.
That's a good point.
Am I gonna cheat on a shitty
You already
kiss?
cheated. You already cheated. You cheated on a fiance on a shitty kiss. Is that really what you want?
Where
2 minutes.
Where
Come
did
here.
you guys come
Wait.
from?
Can I just hug you goodbye? I'll hug you goodbye.
You can give me a hug,
Goodbye.
okay?
Come here. Hug with me and kiss me. 2 minutes.
No, no, no,
Two
no,
minutes.
no, it's
2 minutes. Okay, kiss me. See.
No, 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 no.
She can't see. My friend's talking to her.
Stop it!
So this pretty much covers, like aligning the emotional side of her brain with the logical side of her brain.
Okay, so this is framed as a successful conquest, I want to add, within PIMP. So I showed that video not to be shocking, but to instead illustrate that this moment presented in Julian's hidden camera footage is represented in the game. As a player, if you continue to engage with him to the point that you end up outside the bar and are invited to leave the venue with him, even when you push back, you may be physically moved around and touched sexually without your consent. It's really important to me that this is not me inventing what Julian is like in any way, but presenting him and his behaviors in the way that he's presented them himself, and also importantly, has suggested them as a template for his many thousands of online fans and people that purchase his videos to follow. After each interaction in the game, you're prompted with a series of options. Generally, the options include a tonal range from being enthusiastic to the pickup artist approach, to being snarky, to being polite, to resorting to being aggressive in rejecting them. Each option results in a different outcome, illustrating how the pickup artist has described ways of handling the different ways that women respond to them. Each pickup artist handles rejection and women's overall attitudes very differently. This is a bit of a spoiler alert, but for example, if you play through, you'll notice that, and we will, that Julian will persist with you until you physically push him away. So later when we play through, if you want him to go away, the first time you have a physical option, go for that. So yeah, Julian will persist until you physically push him away, whereas even the slightest hint of attitude or confidence will signal to Luke that you aren't submissive and therefore aren't worth his time, and he'll disengage from you immediately. Also, Luke is called Luke in the game, even though it's obviously Rushvi, because in Russia, Rushvi got caught by a talk show pretending to be a guy named Luke while he was picking up women. So I honored that in the game. As a player and as the target of pickup artists' attention, you can make a broad range of decisions, from opting to hook up with different pickup artists in multiple locations to attempting to get away from them immediately. In making the game, I didn't want to make the point necessarily escape, and I hope that players, if they aren't triggered by it, do experiment with seeing what a successful conquest looks like from the perspective of each of the pickup artists. The game, and this is important to me, it never slut-shames the player by any means and allows you to turn the tables and pursue the pickup artists yourself if you feel inclined. I've tried to depict not only the breadth of the field of pickup art in the game, but also the extent to which each of these gurus also copy their moves from each other. You'll see this one quite a lot. The old, let's watch this thing in my bedroom, they all do that. Also, this game was made from hundreds of handmade and then digitally manipulated cyanotypes. These are on tile. A lot of them are on paper. This is what it looks like after they're combined and altered digitally and then put into Python and RenPy. I really wanted the look and the sound of the game to be analogous to the way that one feels when they're in these kind of situations. So I brought back some of my background in more traditional art processes rather than using the all digital sprite-based RPG look I had originally planned to use. So hopefully it'll be out in full online, hopefully by the end of January. Before we play through just a few minutes of it together, I want to say that it's actually also quite funny. For example, Julian is obsessed with Twilight and the Vampire Diaries series, and a great deal of his pickup lines involve those two things. And Roosh has this really weird story he tells about living off the land and growing only butter lettuce and organic watermelons. But I frame this game in the way that I do for this context because this field seems easy to dismiss as not real to many. And when I talk about the field in this work, I wanted to share with you some of the gravity of the situation by seeing it in practice. I'm interested in the complexity of these spaces and not flattening them the way that mainstream media does, but instead mapping them out and making their complexities more accessible. I think that understanding these practices and why they're so appealing to so many men is instrumental in trying to dismantle them. There's a huge industry now devoted to providing men with answers to how to get women to engage with them. Unfortunately, many of these pickup artist practices forget entirely about consent and rely on very outdated ideas of biological determinism and make assumptions about what women are naturally like that are kind of ridiculous. So, for the last 10 minutes, I want to walk you through a playthrough of the game, and again, I think it becomes kind of clear when you want to get away with from someone how to do that, and it's going to require your participation. I'm going to open it up, turn the sound down. Oh, you can't even see it right now. There we go. Oops. Okay. I'm going to turn on a timer so we don't go over. Timer setting now. I'm going to turn down the soundtrack. Okay, so I'm going to guide you through how we'll play through it in a moment. In the beginning, it opens up with a content warning, but you got the extreme extended content warning, so we'll kind of skip that. So when we play through this, I'm just going to turn this down a little more. I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, or 4 every time we get to a forking path. And then if you can just yell out whatever number, I will just listen to whatever is the loudest, because in this context, that's how consensus is going to work. So I'm just not going to give you the option right now. And please let me know if I go too fast, because it's reading. One or two? Oh, thank you. Because then otherwise it would have been a really short playthrough. One, two, 3, or 4. There's a lot of, there's a bourbon crowd. All right. Is that kind of night? It's only Tuesday, people. This part is really just to get used to using the interface, and setting the scene. One, 2, 3, or 4. 3, okay. One, 2, 3, or 4. One, 2, 3, or 4. Okay, 4. One, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, or 4. I hear some very enthusiastic 4s. One, 2, 3, or 4. One, 2, 3, or 4. 1, 2, 3, or 4. A little bit of a spoiler alert earlier, but. One, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Enthusiastic 3. One, 2, 3, or 4. Okay. One, 2, 3, or 4. Again. Okay. One, 2, 3, 4. Okay. We have 1 minute left. 1, 2, 3, or 4. Well, that is time. We will just watch him go away. Ooh, something interesting just happened. And that's the game of the game. And there's so much more content that you missed out on that you can play on Tuesday. Thank you so much. Question. I was told that there's a microphone that you're supposed to ask questions into for the live stream. There it is. Question? Oh.
So I've seen some of your work on Panther Modern.
Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering, like, what does furries mean to you? Because in one of your games, or like interactive media, you have furries in there.
I have what?
You have furries, like you use.
I know what furries are, but sorry, can you describe when I use furries?
It was like one of the artworks that you had in Panther Modern. It was like an interactive, like, art. It was like you enter a room, and there's like a furry that's retelling like a story to you.
I think you're talking about, so Panther Modern is a project by Laturbo Avedon, and there are 16 or 17 rooms, I think. I'm room 16.
Yeah.
So it sounds like that's somebody else's work that you're describing.
Okay.
Unless you can, because I think furries are awesome. In Pittsburgh, we have the Anthrocon conference every year, and there's an amazing furry parade that happens that is like a super great part of Pittsburgh culture, but I'm not exactly sure about there, because in my Panther Modern piece, it's called Do Not Enter, and it's a 3D environment where you go through different, you look at different walls and get different parts of the story of my exchanges with Rushvi. And the only way that you can see those stories, because it's the only place that I've hosted them, are inside this like YouTube annotations-based like dungeon crawler. But to my knowledge, there aren't any furries in my work.
I'm almost positive I saw like a furry dancing or something.
No, that must be somebody else's room.
Okay.
The Panther Modern project is awesome, but yeah, that's definitely somebody else's room. Sorry to disappoint you.
I probably mixed two projects together.
I think so.
I'm sorry.
But yeah, check out Panther Modern. It's a cool project. It's like a digital museum that only exists in digital space.
I was wondering if you have any interactions in real life with the people who did the online harassment. Has anybody actually taken it to the next level of seeking you out?
Yeah, during like the height of the project, the height of the visibility of the project, there was definitely a couple people who were interacting with me on Twitter, letting me know that they regularly knew where I was, and some of them did come to a performance that I gave, walking through the process of the project. There was a lot more heightened security around things that I was doing at that time, but yeah, there were definitely people who came. I was certainly very nervous about that, but when they were actually there, I think they were surprised at how nuanced my presentation was, and also that they were kind of outnumbered in a way. One of them did come up after me, and they were like, "I'm Taco Idol," and I was like, "Oh." I know, I'm sad to say, I know what that means. And he just asked me, like, why do you hate men? And I was like, I'm like bummed that that's what you got out of my project, because, that's just not true. And yeah, so I've definitely been confronted, but usually with an amount of nervousness that wasn't as threatening as I expected. But yeah, people have definitely come that have harassed me from the Rushvi forum in particular. Also people from Gamergate, because at the same time as that project was happening, Gamergate was happening, and so there was maybe an unsurprising overlap in those communities, and I was certainly getting additional harassment as many game developers and artists involved with critiquing gender and racial biases in games were experiencing as well as that time. But yeah. Oh, it's just gonna make you re-ask it.
Did you ever have a moment where you felt like you made a change or someone's perspective changed? Like, what difference do you think happened because of your efforts?
Thank you for asking that. I think I kind of accidentally maybe focused too much on the negative outcomes of this project, but I do still get regularly contacted by people who say that a lot of people in the particular community that I was engaged in the manosphere have never actually interacted with somebody who self-identifies as a feminist, so it's a very abstract thing for them, and in general, things that are abstract are easier to, hate on. And yeah, a lot of them wrote to me saying that they were surprised that a feminist could just listen to somebody else that they don't agree with, and that they've since sought out opportunities to talk to people that had different perspectives from them. And a lot of those people also got banished from the Bruce V forum. You can see their names get crossed out over time, also for voicing that kind of perspective in that space. So yeah, I've definitely been contacted by a whole lot of people saying that I changed their idea of what a feminist might be. So I think that was a net gain from the project for sure. Thanks for asking that.
So when I see these works, they're not surprising. I mean, your art practice is interesting and surprising, but the content, and so then I wonder, is this for men mostly? Is that the audience, or yeah, I'm interested in how you approach, if there's multiple audiences, how you talk to them or think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I sought out to make particularly the game for men, but I think it kind of has played out that men I've been able to watch play it, a lot of play testers and also people that I've talked to after their experiences, men have been much more shocked by the nature of the material, and you can go much deeper into the pathways that of each of the pickup artists, and we didn't even get to 3 of them. But yeah, they're much more surprised and much less likely to actually explore some of the, the agency angles where you actually pursue a sexual exchange with one of the pickup artists, whereas the women who've played it are usually more game to check that out. So yeah, I definitely have realized that, and I don't want to frame this as an empathy game, because I think that there's an issue in the games industry right now trying to create game experiences that produce empathy, but rarely from the perspectives of people in the communities that they're trying to create empathy within. So I'm a little hesitant to say that it is that, but I definitely want people who haven't had these experiences to potentially rethink some of their performances of masculinity after they play this game. So I don't know. I guess maybe the audience is men, accidentally.
So on a little bit different issue, I work in K-12 education, and there's a lot of push to get women and students of color to go into tech fields. Based on your experience both in game design and also in the type of interviews you're doing, do you think it's a good idea for us to be encouraging more women to go into game design as a field?
well, if we don't, it's gonna stay like that. Yeah, I mean, I think that it is. I think that it's really important that people who have been the perspectives of people who've been historically kept out of the production end of these fields need to be a part of them. Otherwise, they won't change. And also, like, great assumptions are made about, you know, people without their voices being there. So, although, yes, it's toxic, and there's lots of problems within there, I don't think that those are problems that we should just ignore. And I think that it's a field that's worth saving, or saving's the wrong word, but yeah, I would definitely, I mean, in my work and also what I do as an educator is hope and work toward making sure that more people from different perspectives have access to the tools to change this field. So I think it's super important. Yeah.
What would you say to a 15-year-old African-American girl considering it? Like, how much would you, like, how bad would you present it as a field? What types of things should she be facing?
I mean, I think it's hard to answer that because it depends on what aspect of the field that they're interested in. But I mean, I'm not suggesting that everybody should just go head first into the manosphere and start asking questions. Like, I think that, you know, that's what I did, but I don't think necessarily that's like a great template for someone. I mean, it's certainly hard to publish games that are different from mainstream games and put them into the distribution channels that currently exist for games. So, like when Steam had Steam Greenlight, you know, lots of developers were putting really challenging games into that context and then getting sort of, for lack of better words, shit on by a community that expects a certain amount of hours of gameplay, a certain type of levels, a certain, you know, style of game that gets their bang for their buck. So, I mean, I don't know, I would tell her to go for it, and that her voice is sorely needed in that industry, and that there are things are happening to try. There are many initiatives happening right now that are trying to make more space for women and women of color within the industry. That I'm hopeful that by the time she's going into the industry, that things will have changed a lot. Like I think of Soha Kareem, who was a part of Dames Making Games in Canada and managed to get a job at Riot Games, like working toward making sure that that particular developer was considering diversity not only in its hiring, but also the representations of people within their game. So I think there's hope. Go for it. I would give a very different talk to that 15-year-old than I did to this school. I would be like, look at all of the diverse makers who are making all this cool shit that more people should be playing. Here's what we can do to make sure that happens. That's the talk I would give to her. But y'all are college students, so you don't get that talk. Thanks for having me.